So now that that's out of the way, we're going to talk about our topic today. So if you've been on my trainings over the last several weeks, you may have noticed a bit of a theme. I'm trying to kind of bring more of nervous system information into our time together. As somebody who has trained to be a therapist and I have a lot of therapeutic information, I know that the best tool we have against stress, especially chronic stress, stress that's unavoidable, is really internal. How do we renew and tend to our nervous systems? Because this is how we make caregiving sustainable. This is how we build emotional resistance or resistance. No, that's the right word. um, so that we can be less triggered or less activated with stress, and that we can have more joy and ease in our day-to-day life. So that at least is the goal, right? So sacred slowness is important because we all know that caregiving can be intense and it can be very packed full, right? There's a lot going on in the day. And you compound that to culturally as Americans, urgency, moving fast, quick results. These are things that are praised. These are things that are expected. These are things that are hallmark of our success, right? Can you multitask? Can you give your 110%? Are you willing to do what it takes to get to where you're going, right? But caregiving can't always operate that way, right? Of course, what we do, the things that we achieve and we accomplish are necessary, but we're not working in a space of like output, right? We don't have quotas we have to meet. We're not working in like, a corporate space where time is money, okay? So it can be difficult to kind of separate our cultural's idea of how we spend our time and the reality of what we're experiencing day to day, right? So my goal with this training is to first validate that there's a lot going on in your space, but also to invite you to take it in a little more slowly. And the reason why is because slowness, it does heal and allow us to build resilience in our nervous system. I'll grab a tissue real quick. Okay, so caregiving isn't a job. I mean, it is a job, but at its core, it's a relationship, right? And relationships are grown in a slower space, right? In breath, in moments that we don't rush past. And so today we're going to explore how slowing down physically, slowing down emotionally, and in our relationships, right? And how this can be a really, really powerful tool as a caregiver. And I do want to start with this. Slowness doesn't mean laziness, okay? Slowness is nervous system repair. It's attunement, right? Trust. That's what slowness is. That's what sacred slowness is in the context of this presentation. So we're going to talk a little bit about the science of our nervous system during this presentation. It's not going to be a very long one. It's not going to be very information heavy. It's really supposed to, well, my hope is that it will just prompt some reflection, some introspection in you, and how you can maybe modify your time a little bit more to activate this slowness and this rest in your nervous system. But it is based off of the work of Stephen Porges or Porges, I'm not sure how you pronounce it, but it's the polyvagal theory, okay? And so what this means is we have kind of two distinct branches in our nervous system, okay? One of them is our stress response, right? That what we consider like our fight, flight, or freeze space. And one of it is our slower, calmer space that we call our rest and digest space, okay? So we want to try to stay in rest and digest more than we are in that fight, flight, or freeze, okay? So it's kind of like nervous system activation versus nervous system rest, okay? Neither one is right or wrong. They work together, right, in our system. But sometimes we can be in an activated anxiety, stress space for prolonged periods of time. And so we have to be intentional about switching over into that rest space in our nervous system. And that's really what polyvagal theory is. Excuse me, my phone's ringing. So our nervous systems co-regulate, right, with other human beings. So that can be through facial expressions, tone of voice, even just our presence in the room. And so when we're slower, when we're not rushing, when we're not, in a time crunch, our brain is reading safety. Okay. And so, of course, conversely, if we are rushing and pushing through like that, not giving ourselves time to be present and mindful, that activates our stress response in our brain. Okay. So we can use mindfulness-based stress techniques or stress reduction techniques. These have been well studied, and they show that present moment awareness, right? Slowing down and not just rushing past, but actually like being in the moment. This lowers our stress hormones. This lowers our cortisol. This improves our immune system and how it functions. And it also helps with emotional regulation, and it enhances our empathy. So you can tell these are all really, really key components to sustainable caregiving, right? You can't be getting sick all the time. You can't be, emotionally dysregulated. And empathy is definitely a huge tool that we use every day in the things that we do. Okay. So as I get into this training, I hope you can start thinking about, when have I maybe rushed through something? When have I maybe not been present where I should have been? Maybe, where have I sacrificed relationship for output? Right. And we can very easily get in that space and not even realize we're in it. So this might just be a little mile marker for you to remind you, bing, hey, slow it down a little bit, be present, right? Take a breath. Right? So let's get into the information. So what is sacred slowness? So when I use the word sacred, it's definitely not within a religious or spiritual definition. Sacred just means something that is special, right? That's precious, that should be prioritized, okay? That should be protected. So slowness can be sacred because it's an act of intentionality on how we move through the world and the things that we have to do, okay? So again, slowness is not laziness, it's being present, okay? Sacred slowness is that conscious pause that's rooted in care, okay? So I am purposely slowing down so that I can care for myself and I can care for my loved one, okay? And it creates space for that relational connection, self-reflection, and repairing the nervous system. Okay, so fast isn't always effective, and slowness can often bring deeper trust, not even just for the relationship between you and your loved one that you're caring for, but even just trusting yourself and your own body's signals and what it's telling you, what it needs. Okay, so let's begin by asking a question. What if slowness is not weakness, but wisdom, right? I've learned to slow down because it benefits me more than being fast, right? That's wisdom, learning from, past situations where maybe you depleted yourself too much. And of course, culturally, we get these messages that fast is good, fast service, fast answers, fast fixes, right? Everything has to be lightning fast for it to be good. But when it comes to caregiving, speed can sometimes come at the cost of your connection with your loved one and also with yourself, right? How many times have you started the day and it just kind of flies by in a blur? And at the end of the day, you're like, what did I even do today? How did I even feel today? Did I even eat today? Right? Because you're just bouncing from one thing to the next. And sometimes that's just the nature of the beast, right? And there are days where that's just what has to happen. But the goal here isn't to make every day slow and mindful and peaceful, like a meditative experience. The goal is to remind you to be intentional about taking that time when you need it, if you can. And if you can't when you need it, don't forget to come back to it, right? Always schedule some softness, some slowness in your space if you can. So sacred slowness is the act of choosing presence. So not collapsing or giving up, but creating space for breath, creating space for your nervous system to reset and repair and settle, right? Space for you to just, or for you to be here in the moment and not just white knuckle yourself through it, right? We don't want to constantly be on this roller coaster ride, gripping through it and not being able to experience those moments of presence and slowness, okay? So this isn't a passive thing. This is a very powerful and potent thing because it's rooted in our nervous system regulation, okay? And also being slow helps you to attune more into the needs of your loved one, right? And it builds trust in that relationship, right? It's a very powerful tool. This can help deepen your attunement, and it tells the person that you're caring for that you're not just managing them and their care, that you're there with them, right? This is a relationship that you have. It's not just a job, a task, a duty, okay? Um, and it can also say too, to yourself that I'm here with myself. I'm present in my body. I'm aware. I'm in tune with myself and what I need, right? So let's talk a little bit more about the nervous system, okay? Your body craves slowness. Now, I'm not talking about, long, slow, boring days where you're just like, oh my gosh, this day is just dragging on, right? um, I'm just talking about the way that we interact with the input that we're getting in a day to day, right? How present we are in that moment. So, some interesting facts: our brains scan for safety 4 times a second. Okay, that's a lot. And so, fast paces can feel threatening sometimes, right? Slowness activates the parasympathetic nervous system, that rest and digest space. And calm caregivers help calm others through co-regulation. Now, of course, you may be thinking, well, if everyone's co-regulating off of me, who am I co-regulating off of, right? And that's a valid question. But if you are in a caregiving space, you obviously have, maybe some go-to supports, with friends, family, things like that, that you can help co-regulate. But I think oftentimes the regulation is really up to us, right? So that's why I think it's important to not only give you the skills and the tools to be able to regulate yourself, but also the science behind why it matters, right? So slowing down supports your memory, the control you have over your emotions, and your decision making. So this may sound a lot of science at first, but we're not just going to focus on facts. We're going to talk about our feelings a little bit too. So the nervous system, it's scanning for safety 4 times a second. It's constantly asking one question: am I safe in this space? Am I safe? Right? And it's not asking it just once, it's asking 4 times every second. Am I safe? Am I safe? Am I safe? Am I safe? Okay. So when things go too fast, like voices, movements, tasks, the body may interpret that as a threat. Okay. Not because anything's wrong, but because the speed of it is very overwhelming. Okay. And so the nervous system doesn't always speak English, it speaks in pace sometimes. And so if you are, caring for someone who has like ADHD or autism or some neurodivergence, or if you yourself have a neurodivergence, your nervous system is more sensitive to threat and stress than a neurotypical nervous system. Okay, so that's why you have people have like sensory overload, right? Or they melt down, like little ones will have, meltdowns because of all the sensory input is overwhelming to them, okay? This happens, right? Because your nervous system is feeling unsafe. And so it's going to respond as if it's unsafe, okay? So, and that's when we call like the fight or flight, right? That's that keyed up, that activated state of I'm not safe. How do I make myself stay safe, okay? But sacred slowness, slowing down, being mindful, being present, that helps your nervous system drop out of that activated state. Okay. And this is what we call the parasympathetic system, that part of the nervous system that is responsible for healing, for resting, for social connection. Okay. So when you've got your fight, flight, or freeze activated, you're not your brain and your nervous system are not focused on healing and social connection, right? You're very agitated and you're more rigid and you want to isolate more, right? So when we slow down, breathe, speak gently, okay, this is where that regulation happens. And when you're in that space with your loved one, that's co-regulating for them as well, okay? You start to mirror a rhythm for both of you, right? And so your body and their body can say, oh, we're safe here. We're in relation with one another. This is a calm space to be in, right? And when we're in that space, when that parasympathetic nervous system is activated, it's easier to control impulses. Our memories improve. Emotional regulation works a lot better in this softer state than it does when you're activated, okay? So it's not about being kind. I mean, it is part of it, right? We're being kind to the one we're taking care of, we're being kind to ourselves, but this is just an effective way to make what we do sustainable so that we aren't overwhelmed consistently with stress, overwhelm, and running from the one thing to the next. So when fast becomes frantic, okay, so this is a little bit about how does chronic hurry impact us negatively, okay? So caregiving can feel like a race against the clock sometimes, right? I've got this, I've got that, I've got this, and I got all done before 3:30 so that mom can get her, her bath or whatever, right? And so it can be a race against the clock, and that's true. I'm not trying to minimize the necessity for rushing sometimes, right? It just has to happen. Managing meals, medications, appointments, meltdowns, right? So of course you're going to be moving fast in that space. You kind of have to, right? But when it becomes our default mode, that's when it costs us a lot, okay? Having stressful days, having rushed days is unavoidable, but it doesn't have to be our constant state of being, okay? So the body in a constant state of urgency is going to release stress hormones like adrenaline, like cortisol. And over time, it really just causes a wear and tear on your body, right? Your physical health and your emotional well-being. And so you might notice it in small ways, like snapping at someone you love, crying over something that maybe is not a cryable offense, something that maybe is minor that maybe wouldn't have made you cry before, or feeling like you always have a short fuse where you're just like always on that edge of like, it's literally my last nerve and you're about to run right over it, right? This is our biology, right? We get to these spaces where we are chronically stressed or chronically moving really, really fast. Our bodies respond, okay? So it is biology, it is nature, but we have the capacity to pull it back a little bit, right? To be present, to be mindful, to be intentional about slowing it down, okay? Because we're not meant to run on red alert all day, every day, right? That's not good for our nervous system. It doesn't allow us to repair, it doesn't allow us to restore. And so we're not meant to be in that space all the time. Many of the people that you're caring for, especially if there's children or adults who have trauma, or like I said before, a neurodivergence, that can increase your nervous system sensitivity. And if you maybe have some trauma in your background, you may not have realized that it makes your nervous system a little bit more sensitive, but it does. And so when you're in a very activated space like that, where your nervous system is kind of keying up for safety and survival, the person you're talking to may not even hear what you're saying to them, right? They may not understand. They may not have a concrete understanding of what you're saying verbally, but they can feel how you're saying it. Okay, so we speak a lot to each other. We communicate a lot with each other without words. Okay, so being fast and caring, being fast in those tasks, it gets the job done, but it can also kind of send this unspoken message of we need to get this over with, rather than you matter enough to take time with. Now, of course, depending on the task, there's some tasks you don't want to leisurely stroll through, right? You kind of do just want to get it over with, and that's okay. But I'm saying if this is your default, right, where every interaction you have with your loved one is a rushed, task-oriented thing rather than relationship, that's going to get both of your nervous systems kind of keyed up, and you can feed off of each other, and it just makes it worse, okay? So power of the pause, okay? Stillness can build trust, again, not only with you and yourself, but you and the loved one that you're caring for, okay? So a pause signals presence, okay? That says, I'm here with you, okay? Moments of stillness help the brain feel safe enough to engage in social and relational interaction. Pausing can help reduce overwhelming situations you're in, right? And then it allows room for choice. How am I going to respond to this rather than how am I going to react, right? Because a reaction isn't always manageable, but a response is, it's intentional, right? And so, of course, when we are slow, we're taking that pause, we're better attuned, right? We can better listen, we can better hear, okay? So a pause can feel like nothing, right? But our nervous system, that pauses everything, right? It gives us that time to recalibrate, to settle, okay? So when we pause, even if it's just for a breath or for a beat, right? That's not being inefficient. You're telling your nervous system, I'm not doing this, I'm here for this, right? It adds a level of intentionality into it. And that intention brings you more into that present space, and that you can be more mindful in that space. And mindfulness is a foundation to building resilience in our nervous system. Okay. I hope that makes sense. And so when we're truly present, we give other people permission to be present as well, right? Especially those in our care, okay? Because if we're constantly rushing through something, we're just trying to get it over with, we're sending them signals that the relationship isn't as important as the task at hand. And it can be really difficult to be a person receiving that energy and know, what to do with it, right? Where do I stand now? And you might not even be doing it on purpose. Most of us probably aren't. We're just getting through the day. But again, this presentation is to invite you to kind of look at your caregiving routines and the energy you bring into that space, and how you can maybe modify it so that's calmer for you and the person you're caring for. Pausing allows us to create space for choice, right? It can soften urgency, and it can help you gather your thoughts or gather your courage, right? Or whatever it is that you need to fulfill the duty at hand. And so this isn't like silence as punishment, like I just need to, retreat and be by myself, right? It's kind of an invitation for yourself to kind of say, how do I feel in this moment? Are my needs being met? If not, how can I meet them when the task is over, right? It just gives you that pause, that space to be more intentional with what you do with that energy. And so when we're frustrated, especially, a pause can reroute the entire interaction, right? Instead of reacting, we're responding. Instead of escalating, we attune, okay? These kinds of things. We're not changing the scenario we're in, we're changing our response in that scenario, okay? So when we're caregiving for a loved one, we build trust with them, not in grand gestures, right? But in small, quiet moments, okay? Taking a breath before answering, really trying to listen, really trying to attune to your own body and the communication coming from the other person, okay? If we're going too fast, we're going to miss a lot of that. So what does it look like in action? Okay. I'm not asking you to go from being the hare to the tortoise. Okay. Sometimes we need the hare, right? We need to be fast, and we need to be efficient, and we need to be focused on tasks at hand, right? I'm not trying to guilt anyone for those times. It's about remembering the tortoise is still part of the story as well. Okay. So small shifts, big impact. Okay. So sacred slowness doesn't require some retreat in the mountains, okay? That sounds lovely, but it's usually not a reality that we can just whisk off whenever we're feeling stressed to some quiet, serene space, right? But we can have sacred slowness in our day-to-day, right? In the hallway, in the kitchen, the car ride home, right? Taking that breath before you respond, okay? So here's some things that you can try. Before entering into a room, pause. Okay. Take 3 deep breaths and let your body kind of be in that space and settle in that space before you speak, right? Um, if you tend to speak quickly, most of us do, especially, Americans, we tend to talk a lot faster than other cultures. Experiment with slowing your tone, right? Some of you are probably already doing this, especially if your loved one maybe has cognitive impairments or a different age, right? And you just can't just spout off really quickly. You need to give them time to get the information to process it. But some of us have never had to really fall into that space, and so we can kind of get in that habit of talking quickly. So this is just an invitation to try talking a little slower, see how that feels, right? Experiment with slowing your tone. just in a grounded space, right? You're not performing guru or Zen, right? You're just trying to slow it down and kind of ground your own nervous system into the words you're about to say, right? Um, Next, offer longer transitions. So this is really important, especially if you're caring for kiddos where maybe, they transition from, school to the bus, from bus to home, from home to extracurriculars, right? There's a lot of shifting that happens. And if you're caring for someone who has a more sensitive nervous system, those transitions can be really, really difficult to navigate. So not even just in those spaces, but I think even just for you as a caregiver, allowing longer transitions, okay, that can be very, very helpful. So whether you're ending playtime or starting bedtime or even leaving the house or even coming back to the house from something else, a rushed transition can be kind of jarring, and it kind of signals to our nervous system there's threat in the area, right? But a slow one builds a more calm, more mindful, more present space, okay? So if you can, try to build buffer space into your day, right? So even if it's just adding an additional 10 to 15 minutes between appointments or obligations that you have, this will give you time to catch your breath, okay? And this is how we regulate ourselves, right? We're not jumping from one extreme stress to another extreme stress. Building in those buffers, those minutes where you can say, I'm gonna slow down, I'm gonna take some breaths, right? I'm gonna feel my body's reaction to this transition, what just happened, or I'm gonna steel myself, I'm gonna prepare myself for what's coming, right? Those small pauses, that's like a breath of fresh air for your nervous system, okay? So it doesn't run it down, it doesn't grind it down, it gives it time to come up for air, okay? Next, get comfortable with silence. Sometimes we are uncomfortable if people aren't talking or doing. We feel like we have to, we're like obligated to fill the silence, okay? And that can be uncomfortable when there's too much and it kind of is like those awkward pauses, right? But silence is necessary. Not every moment has to be filled with solutions or corrections or conversation, okay? Sometimes the deepest connection we have is just those quiet moments, right? Where we aren't pressured to perform or pressured to do. We can just be in relationship with others or even just in relationship with ourselves. Again, if we get too busy, if we move too fast, we miss a lot of these subtle cues from our nervous system and from our bodies that signal that we need to rest or we need to pull it back, right? We can just kind of blow past those and ignore them. And then before we know it, we've got nothing left, right? Because we ignored our body telling us to slow down and to take notice, right? Okay, so I'm going to give you a little bit of a reflection practice that you can try either right now or you can try it later if you have time. So I want you to not be in learning mode, so to speak, with me right now, but kind of more in feeling mode, okay? So you don't have to write anything down, you don't have to share anything, right? We just want to be present with ourselves, okay? So if it feels safe for you to close your eyes, I invite you to do that. If you don't feel comfortable doing that, that's fine too. There's no rules. But I just want to invite you to take a long, slow breath in through your nose and gently release it through your mouth. Okay? What this is doing, it's signaling to our nervous system that we're safe. Okay? Because if you are gearing up to fight, you're going to be breathing shallow and you're going to be breathing quickly. Okay? But if you take these intentional slow breaths, you're signaling to your nervous system that it's a time for calm, it's a time for safety, it's a time for presence. Okay? So in this space, I want you to think of a recent moment in your caregiving where you felt rushed. It could even be today, right? Trying to get here by 10 o'clock, right? But think about that moment, whatever it is. And I don't want you to judge yourself for feeling rushed. I just want you to remember it, okay? So think about this. What did your body feel like when you were rushed? Were your shoulders tight? Was your jaw clenched? Did your words come really fast? So now imagine what it would have felt like if you had paused instead. Just to take one breath. just to soften your voice. So if you had done that, what might have shifted? So think about that and ask yourself, can I carry this image of slowness with me into the next moment that asks for slowness, right? Can I choose to be slow? Can I give myself permission to settle before responding? Okay. So you are allowed to slow down. You are allowed to take a moment to collect yourself. Okay. Your nervous system needs you to do that. Otherwise, it's going to be like a frayed wire all the time, right? Activated, scanning for danger, scanning to be, what's the next thing I have to do, right? And then it leaves no room for that calm, restorative rest that it needs. Okay, so you're allowed to give yourself those moments. All right, so this is my final thought for you all. I want to leave you with something soft. Maybe no one's ever said this to you. Maybe they haven't said it in a long time, but I'll say it now. You are allowed to go slowly. You are allowed to take one more breath before you enter a room. You're allowed to let silence linger. And you're allowed to move with kindness towards yourself, not just towards others. We forget that sometimes, right? We forget that kindness isn't just an external output, it's internal as well. And I would argue that the more kind you are towards yourself, the greater capacity you have to be kind towards others. So being slow, taking a posture of sacred slowness, this isn't an idea that you have to live up to, right? It's not a performance, it's not a mask you put on. And it's definitely not just one more thing you have to do, right? It's an invitation to soften, an invitation to return back to a calm state, right? And to remember who you are beneath all of the rush, all of the tasks, all of the to-dos, right? Just to take that moment to collect, right? Being fast isn't always the wisest course of action, right? It's necessary sometimes, but it doesn't have to be. Everything you do is approached with fastness, right? So I'm going to read this to you as a little blessing. Take it as you will. May your body remember this rhythm long after the last slide fades. May your breath be your companion. And may your caregiving be not just sacred, but slow. This is how we repair our nervous system. This is how we maintain and tend to our stress response. It's an active, living thing in our bodies, okay? That is how we navigate every aspect of our lives. So if your foundation is a fried and dysregulated nervous system, it is going to impact every single thing you do. Okay, but if you take time to tend that nervous system, to slow down, to be present, you are healing and soothing that foundation that, again, affects every interaction of every day and everything that you do. Okay. So here's my contact info. If you want to reach out and schedule a care chat with me, if you just have some things you need to talk about, I'm here. Okay. Send me an email, call me. We'll get you scheduled, and it won't have to take long. It can just be 15 minutes, 30 minutes, an hour, whatever you need, just to kind of decompress a little bit, right? If you're interested in taking advantage of our free mental health services through our family wellness initiative, reach out to me. I'll send you a referral. Our therapist, Kendra, will get a hold of you and just kind of discuss, questions, concerns, and thoughts. It's not a guarantee you have to do it, but if you're curious and you want some information, let me know. And I think I'll go ahead and stop my share and record.